my name is Matt Bach. I'm the director of the triathlon business for the UCAN company. And with us today, we have Tim O'Donnell, top 10 in Kona, 5 of the last 7 years, podium, 3rd place finish in 2015, coming hot off 4th place finish last year in a hard-fought battle with Braden Curry, who ended up beating for 5th. And husband to Rinny, father to Izzy. Many of you know him from the Tim and Rinny show. Welcome, Tim.
Oh, thanks for having me, Matt. Yeah, I'm glad everybody could join in and chat a little bit about Kona and nutrition and any other stuff you have on your mind.
Heck yeah. I mean, I'm thrilled because, I mean, really, we got 10 days to Kona, 10 days to the big dance. We are in the home stretch here. All the work's done for you at this point as far as the training's concerned. You're just kind of, haze in the barn and you're ready to go. So this is an exciting time to be talking to you. As one of the Kona contenders. It's just incredible to hear what you have to say and how you're going to be hopefully mixing it up in the top 10, top 5, top 3, who knows what. So tell me, you had a sort of a rocky start. We'll go back first. Maybe just right now I'll give a quick glimpse of what this is going to look like. First we'll talk sort of about your Kona prep briefly. So sort of how the years went, some of the prep in Kansas where you are right now. Then we'll talk in a deep dive into your nutrition, exactly how you use UCAN, how you learned about UCAN, why you made the switch, a deep dive into the nutrition, and then we'll close it out by talking about specific overall strategy for Kona and sort of what the goals are going in 10 days. So at the end, we'll be providing you with some special discount codes for UCAN for those of you who want to try it, and then at the very end, we'll be talking about the questions from all the listeners. So I've already gotten tons of questions from people by email, by Facebook, that I've got listed at the bottom of my little cheat sheet here. And we'll also open it up to questions from people in here right now. So we've got 46 live attendees at the moment, and I've got the questions board up here. So anytime you have a question, it doesn't matter when it is, throw it in there. If I think it's appropriate to answer right away, we will. And if it's going to come up later, then we'll get to it later. So without further ado, Tim, you had a rocky start to the year and a great stretch in the middle, it seemed, with some really great training. You ticked off the Kona box. Then you were faced with some more rocky business over the past couple months. Some of your listeners may already be up to speed because they've listened to the Tim and Rinny show, where you had recapped a lot of that. But can you briefly recap for anybody who hasn't seen that, how the year's gone and some of the obstacles that you've overcome?
Yeah, Matt, it has just been the craziest year for me. I've never been kind of in such great shape all year and not been able to show it in racing. And that all started early in the year when we were in Australia. My original plan, coming off of really a great 2018 with a couple of 70.3 victories and then that 4th place in Kona. I was really excited about 2019 being my 2nd year with Coach Julie Gibbons. I feel like it takes at least a year, 18 months to really get into a groove with a new coach. So yeah, everything was looking really good. I was in great shape, planning to do Ironman Texas, and then I crashed my bike in Australia, broke a bunch of ribs, and just had kind of a struggle coming back to Boulder, recovering from that. I was definitely forcing things way too much. I was trying to get to the start line, and I kept getting sick as a result with all that stress, and ended up missing Ironman Brazil, which was my 2nd choice. And then finally, Rinny just said, "Hey, just stop, get healthy and stop worrying so much, and just let this all come naturally." And it did, barely at Ironman Boulder with a 3rd place. And then everything started to look really good. 2nd at Ironman 70.3 Santa Rosa, way better race than I've ever had there. Best power I put out with a faster run than years past. So that really got me excited. And then 2 weeks before Ironman 70.3 Santa Cruz, which was maybe 6 weeks ago, mm-hmm. At the end of a build run, I hit the edge of the pavement, and it was probably like a 4-inch drop down to the dirt. And I just kind of rolled my foot, inverted my foot, and re-injured that foot injury that I had last year. And that put me we were worried that it was going to put me out of Kona, but luckily we've kind of righted the ship. And since we've been in Kansas, been doing some awesome training, really great numbers, and been out running, a lot of running on the Ultra G, zero gravity treadmill, and now some good stuff outside. And at this point, I'm just excited that I'm racing Kona, and I feel like it's a bonus. So I have nothing to lose right now, and it's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not you. I'm not racing at such a high level, but I know that feeling of sort of the pressure being off a bit. You know, your expectations kind of drop because of that injury, but it's really like when I first heard about it, I was like gutted. I was like, oh no,
Yeah,
it's so
yeah,
close to Kona. Like, who knows what could happen now? But I'm really excited that you'll be at least towing the starting line, and then we'll see what happens. But
yeah.
now,
I mean, last year at Ironman Cairns, coming off of the when I broke my foot at the beginning of last year. And Ironman Cairns, I had one of my fastest, maybe my second fastest Ironman marathon,
hmm,
and that was off of minimal run training, and I surprised myself there. So, I know it's going to be hard, especially that last 12K. It always is in Kona, but at least I know I'll be hungry and fresh, and maybe surprise everybody.
yeah, what is it they say about Kona? Better to go in undercooked than
Right?
overcooked. So
Yep.
maybe
It's
it's a
true.
blessing in disguise.
I've been there. I've been on both sides of that coin, and I'd rather be underdone for sure.
hmm Now, you're in Kansas right now, so this is something that you've done every year for a while now. Like, why Kansas, and how has this gone in Kansas specifically?
So this is our second year coming to Kansas, and
Oh, okay.
we just decided that we really needed to get out of altitude to get that final training block in. It's amazing. Obviously, living in Boulder is unbelievable. It's such a beautiful place to live, and there's great training, but it's hard to back up sessions like you can at sea level. When you're up high, you just don't really recover quite as well, and you don't hit that top end stuff. You don't hit the numbers that you can do down at sea level. So last year, decided that I needed to be at sea level. Hit those little higher power numbers on the bike and recover. And it was amazing. You get up in the morning and you're able to just kind of like train, have another good session, where up in Boulder, it's not that easy. So yeah, it worked really well for us last year, and it's easy. It's an easy drive from Boulder. There's usually some heat and humidity, and there's some beautiful rolling roads out here to ride on, and just really friendly people and a great community. So, and just even trying to find an alter G here, everybody at KU, the track and field team, even some of the soccer team, they kind of came to my rescue and got me into the facility when I needed it. And it's pretty awesome to go to a small little town and find your people.
hmm Very cool. So we'll talk more about specific Kona strategy and your race nutrition strategy very specifically for Kona in a little bit. But for now, let's go back to how did you learn about UCAN and why? Like, why did you choose to make the switch to UCAN?
So I actually learned about UCAN a long time ago, when I was kind of coming off of the Olympic Training Center, and the nutritionist there for the U.S. team when I was on the team was Bob Seebahar. And I'm always looking at new things in the market and ways to become a better athlete. And at that time, I tried it and I didn't understand the product. And I just kind of moved on, and I found myself, years later, this year talking to Matt. And then really when I sat down with the founders and just got talking about how to use the product and what it can do for me. I'm coming off of several years of training with Mark Allen, where metabolic efficiency was very important, not just in training, but in diet as well. So that was one of those things that I take from Mark. A good friend of mine, Greg Bennett, says coaches are like degrees. You're there for a few years and you graduate. You learn what you can from that coach, and you move on and you go get a different degree. So that whole idea of metabolic efficiency was one of those key things I learned with my studies with Mark Allen. So that kind of got me interested in UCAN. And once I sat down and really understood what we're dealing with here and how this helps me as an athlete and as a person just looking to have a kind of a healthy day-to-day lifestyle, I went on board and I started kind of implementing it into a routine. And that's when I really fell in love with the product and how it incorporates with my life.
You say into your life and into your training, and you mentioned those things, like it's been amazing the way that you've implemented it into so many different facets of your life, not just your training, not just your life, not just your racing, really across the whole gamut there. So that's actually how I kind of want to approach this now, like sort of break it into pieces. Like let's first take a look at training, and then we'll look at sort of how you put it into your lifestyle and how you put it into your racing. So first into your training, like what are some of your favorite ways to use it in your training on a training day?
Yeah, it always varies. As everybody knows, triathletes' days are, it's not the same day in and out. You have three different sports plus strength work if you're doing that you have to balance with the rest of your life. So every day is unique. But I found it really important for me on those days where I have kind of hard sessions that are awkwardly spaced. Like, Matt and I talk about Terrible Tuesdays all the time. And, we go out in the morning first thing and do a solid run. Then we have maybe 60 to 90 minutes before we go and do a solid swim. And I've always had trouble with that kind of second workout and having a consistent session because I just it's hard for me to eat and get the calories back in between sessions. So, I just started doing some of the flavored UCAN products in between. And lo and behold, I started to have that, back end of that swim workouts were the best part of my swims, which it's pretty nice to do. And then long rides as well are where I found it's very important. When you're doing high intensity stuff, that's a different formula. But when you're out on those long aerobic rides where you're staying in that kind of aerobic zone, that's when you can, in my opinion, really help train your metabolic system and your efficiency. And that's where I kind of just go purely on UCAN, particularly the first half of those long rides and water. And then, I kind of have noticed how I feel at the back end of those longer rides, those 6.5 hour rides, which is I've never felt before. I've had been on struggle street on a lot of those long sessions. Actually, my first century ride, my first 100 miler, I crashed because I was a little bonky at the end, and I just wasn't paying attention. I was going uphill and I hit a rock.
So UCAN makes you safer too.
Yeah, right.
You couldn't go wonky at the end.
So, I'm at the point now where we do this kind of epic ride at Trail Ridge. If anybody has trained out in Boulder or lives in the area, Trail Ridge is a pass that's a little over 12,000 feet. It goes over the Continental Divide, and from Boulder, it's like 4 to 4.5 hours from our door to the top of Trail Ridge. We stop in Estes Park, which is about 2.5 hours, and you're climbing pretty much the whole way. So up to Estes, I just had 2 scoops of UCAN. And then from Estes on, I had a mix of another 2 scoops with 1 scoop of just like a high glycemic carb. Just for me, when you start to get to those higher altitudes, your processing gets a little funky, and I wanted to make sure I did still have a sharp brain. But we got to the top, and so that's, over 4 hours, just UCAN for the most part. And Rinny, we get up there to the visitor center, and Rinny's just like throwing food in her down, or, grabbing fries or whatever she can and all this food. And I'm just sitting there, and she's like, "Why aren't you hungrier?" And I didn't think about it at the time. Then I'm like, actually, I've been drinking UCAN. I have that consistent energy product. So that was a cool experience for me too, just because I've done that ride so many times and know how I've felt riding at that same effort by the time I get to the top. And I felt like I figured something out with my nutrition and training, and hopefully I'm going to, relate that to figuring that out with my nutrition in Kona.
Yeah, I love that story. If you didn't tell it, I was going to ask you to tell it, because like the fact that you've done it so many times before and you had sort of the same type of result or trajectory in terms of how you felt throughout that long climb. I'm out east, so we don't have 4.5 hour long climbs. That's just incredible. You don't ride back too, do you?
Oh, we did. Yep, that day we did. We usually ride over.
It takes a lot less time, I guess, right?
Yeah, what's that?
Because it takes a lot less time on the way back, I guess, right?
So there's still a couple thousand feet of climbing, though. I think there's still like 3,000 feet of climbing on the way down. Yeah, just the way it works. So
how long is the total ride then?
I think that ride was 6.5 hours.
Yeah, wow.
But we normally go, we ride over the other side of Trail Ridge and do through Grand Lake and what's the ski town? It's blanking. Anyways, there's a ranch that we normally go in there and then train up at 8,000 feet, like Fraser and out there. Winter Park, sorry, that's it.
Winter Park. Yeah, actually, I got a
Yeah.
friend who goes out there sometimes and does a little mini training camp of his own in Winter Park. So we have a very specific question to the ride that you're just talking about for
Yep.
long rides like that. Do you have a breakfast beforehand, or do you go straight out the door and start fueling with UCAN?
So I've kind of changed. I've used UCAN to kind of change my pre-training as well. Um, I've always just kind of done like toast and almond butter, or maybe some jam or some honey. And now I'm kind of like moving more towards UCAN bars. So I love the chocolate bar with just almond butter or peanut butter on it. And then if I really have a big day, I'll either add some like UCAN drink, or if I'm feeling just hungry, I'll have, like a one piece of toast. But I feel like as I transition just to having more of that preloading of UCAN before I train, I think that's a big help too. And now before swim, it's just a UCAN bar and out the door, and a coffee too. I'm a coffee guy, so the idea of coffee gets me out of bed usually.
Well, that sounds extremely convenient too. You don't have to worry about whipping anything up. You're literally just grabbing a bar, throwing some peanut butter on it,
Yeah.
or almond butter. I've started doing that. I hadn't really ever thought about that, but the chocolate peanut butter combination is great. The chocolate peanut butter UCAN bars are great, but if you want to mix it up a little bit, grab a chocolate bar, throw some of your own peanut butter on it.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
And I was just thinking about, what am I doing? Like, how much do I really need? Do I feel like I want a little extra calories, or do I feel hungry, and will it make me just feel a little fuller? So it's kind of just listening to the body a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know, what are your favorite flavors?
So the vanilla recovery is like, I'm drinking that all day with, Matt gave me this tip, unsweetened vanilla almond milk, which is now my go-to, Matt. And then usually if I'm drinking like a flavored, it's usually the orange.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do a lot with the plane, actually. Like I'll race on the plane and I'll make smoothies out of the plane. If if I don't want to put the protein one in there, if I want to add almond butter or peanut butter just for flavor, then I'll throw plain in my recovery smoothie.
Mm-hmm. And then hydrate. Like how does that work into your training and sort of your daily life?
Yeah, usually with hydrated, I'm usually playing catch up on, I hate to say it, but so it's usually at the end of the day where I'm trying to maybe get some more of those electrolytes in. So, probably 2 servings, like afternoon at the end of the sessions, and then in the evening. I feel like that helps me the next day if I'm kind of putting some of those electrolytes back in my body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine given how much you're training, you're sweating a lot, especially at altitude. It's dry, so you don't even really notice you're sweating sometimes. And
Yeah. You go out on a ride and you don't realize how much you sweated, and you're not drinking, and then all of a sudden you're really thirsty.
mm-hmm. And now you're in toasty Kansas, and then you're in toasty Kona, so you're sweating a lot. So you got to keep up with it. And I know, like, while you're actually training, it's hard to keep up with it. So yeah, I've done a lot of the same, and I hear that a lot from a lot of our users, is that they're just kind of sipping on it afterwards to make sure that they're staying topped off on their hydration, especially as you're leading into a race. You really want to make sure that you're very hydrated, if not sort of super hydrated leading into your race, so that you can make sure that you're not getting dehydrated too quickly, which that can happen so fast in Kona.
Yeah, and from what I understand, you can't quite like electrolyte load like you would carbo load or before a race, but you can definitely, like the night before, in the morning of the race, up the electrolyte consumption a little bit to have your body ready that morning.
Mm-hmm. So I want to move on to the sort of the lifestyle piece, like how UCAN is incorporated into lifestyle. You sort of already mentioned a bit in terms of the recovery. You like the vanilla shakes. Maybe you take the vanilla and mix it in with some smoothies, or the plain and mix it in with the smoothies as your sort of recovery beverage. And then as far, of course, hydrate, kind of sipping on that to help replenish. So one of the things that really makes UCAN, where UCAN shines, is the fact that sugary sports drinks and gels and things like that, if you're not going to just like be sitting on the couch, sucking down a gel. They're sugary sports nutrition. They're meant really only for training, but UCAN, because of its origin, is really designed for stabilizing blood sugar, giving you steady energy, and can really be incorporated into your lifestyle as well. So I don't know, tell me about some of your thoughts on that, and maybe some of the ways that you're incorporating it.
Yeah, so we do a lot of training, and it's even for me, it's always been a good excuse to eat a lot of junk, right? Like, you're putting in so much effort, that you're like, oh, I can do whatever I want. And since I've started kind of having, making this change, I've realized how much better I feel, particularly later in the day. And I've always been one that has that, come home, do like a big meal, kind of eat some junk. Then you go into these lulls where you lose all your energy and you're lethargic. And then all of a sudden you're super hungry again. And then you start eating some more junk that you don't really need to be eating. And since particularly with my post training stuff, the smoothies and the shakes, I've been able to kind of have a much nicer like back half of the day where I'm feeling better. I'm not having those changes in energy and drops in energy and feeling lethargic, and I'm not having these crazy hunger attacks. I just feel better, I just feel like I have a consistent, just like in that happy place, like Happy Gilmore would say, finding my happy place. But
Yeah.
it's awesome. I mean, I actually, Rennie loves chocolate. I never ate as much chocolate or ice cream until I met Rennie. She has been a bad influence on me. And, we still do indulge ourselves, of course, but I feel like my cravings, I've always had a sweet tooth, and I feel like my cravings have actually subsided a little bit, particularly at the end of the night, like before you go into bed and you're just kind of eating because you're bored. So it's really been a positive for me, just to have a better way of a better energy source, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So what you mentioned about having that steady energy, like many of the people listening probably have seen the blood sugar chart that we use in a lot of our marketing material. It's right on our website and everything, showing you how, sugar, in the case of the chart there, it's maltodextrin kind of spiking and then crashing with your blood sugar, with your energy levels. But UCAN is giving a steady release of energy over a long period of time. And what you mentioned about hunger is interesting because hunger is really driven by that drop in blood sugar, by that low blood sugar, and it makes you feel hungry. And then you typically feel hungry and crave the carbs, and then you reach for the carbs, and then you're kind of in that like never-ending cycle of spike, crash, spike, crash. And with UCAN, it stabilizes it, so you don't quite feel that hunger because your blood sugar is not dropping to those levels that it would. So if you look at that chart, it basically, it doesn't really fall below baseline until after out at like 2 hours or something like that. So you really keep that stable blood sugar and really helps with body composition. So for a lot of people, they're trying to get that watts per kilogram up. They're trying to shed off, 5-10 pounds, helps you a lot on the run, to be lighter. And, maybe they got 15 pounds to lose. And this, this is a way that it can help you. Use that so that when you get back from your, use it before your workout. And then when you get back from your workout, you might find that you're not as hungry as you normally are, and you're not reaching for that leftover cold pizza from the night before and just shoveling it in. You can like kind of open the fridge and make a smart decision.
Well, and like we often, if you're super hungry when you get back from that effort, it means you really haven't fueled properly during the effort, right? And you're putting your body at a disadvantage for recovery and rebuilding. So that's never really stay. I used to do that because I used to think I had to starve myself for sessions, but that's not a state you want your body to be in. It's just not healthy. It's not going to lead you to your peak performance in training, and then of course in racing. So, it's all about putting the body in a healthy, happy state.
And, going back to the origin story, I just want to touch on that briefly. For anybody who hasn't heard the story of the company, I love it because it's like a noble origin of the company. It came not from some, corporate entity just looking to make money off of a bunch of athletes. It came from this family that wanted to help their child. So their child, his name is Jonah, and he has a rare metabolic disorder called glycogen storage disease. And what it means for him is that he needs to be fed every 2 to 3 hours, or what it used to mean for him, fed every 2 to 3 hours, agro cornstarch off the shelf. That was the best way they found to manage his condition. And he needs to keep really stable blood sugar levels like everyone else, but he struggles to do that because of this disease. So the argo cornstarch was fed to him every 2 to 3 hours through a feeding tube, even through the night. It's life-threatening. So if his blood sugar drops to unstable levels, he could have seizures and he could die. So his parents are setting multiple alarms, making sure that they wake up. It's very stressful for them. They're not getting a lot of sleep. And this has no end in sight. So the parents of Jonah, Wendy and David Feldman, were able to start a foundation and fund some research to try to find either a cure or a better way to manage his disease. And what they ultimately found in about 2008 was a team of Scottish researchers found a cure for or not a cure, a better way to manage this disease. They found a way to take non-GMO cornstarch, which is the base of UCAN, non-GMO cornstarch, cook it through a 40-hour heating process. It's just heat and water. It has to be all natural and very easy on the stomach and natural and everything because it's being fed to babies and kids. So just heat and water, natural, non-GMO cornstarch. It elongates the molecule to the point it's like epic proportions. And just to put it into perspective, simple sugars have a molecular weight of 180, maltodextrin has a molecular weight of 500, and superstarch has a molecular weight of something like 500,000 to 700,000. I mean, it's absolutely massive and totally different than any of the other sports nutrition that's out there. And now the kids that have this disease can take the equivalent of 2 to 3 servings of UCAN before they go to bed, and they can sleep for 8 hours straight. So there's no placebo effect there. I mean, if they took it and it was just placebo, it was just in their head, right? Like they would have died. So we know for sure that it actually does something. And there's been a number of studies, like peer-reviewed double-blinded studies that have been done over the last years to show that this is like really something different and new and a stable energy source. So once they discovered this and they applied it for these kids, then they said, okay, who else, what other applications might there be here? What other applications might there be for a long-lasting, steady energy that stabilizes blood sugar? Let's start with endurance athletes. And so that's when they went to Bob Siebelhar, who you mentioned earlier. They approached him and they said, hey, this is what we've got. Is this interesting at all to you as an endurance athlete? And he said, absolutely. If this does half of what you're claiming it does, then you've got something here. You've got something that could potentially disrupt and revolutionize the industry of sports nutrition. So here we are. They formed a company in 2012. Mebke Flesky has been using it since before the company was a company. He was one of the biggest spokesperson people for us in the early years. And since then, many very high-level athletes like you, Tim, have come on and started using UCAN for the benefits that you've already described so many of, and for some of the other benefits, like for me, avoiding GI distress and avoiding the bonk was the really huge catch for me. Getting that going into my system and really changing my performance, really improving it dramatically. So now let's talk about race nutrition. So that we already talked about training, we talked about lifestyle, and it's in both of those, it's really predominantly UCAN fueled. And in racing, you're going to describe it more, but there's an element of some high glycemic mixed in there to a pretty fair degree at that point. And I'll kick it off to you for now to tell me, like, how did you feel like Ironman Boulder, and then how do you plan to fuel Kona coming up?
Yeah, so I think the important way to look at UCAN in racing is it's your baseline, right? It's your starting point for a consistent energy source. Think of it as a slow drip, right? So if you're preloading and then hitting some on the bike, it's going to be releasing in your body. It's not going to just dump like other stuff. It's going to be consistently releasing in your body throughout the race, right? So for me, that gives me almost like a sense of like a security blanket almost. If I really screw up my other nutrition plan, I know I'm at least going to be having this constant fuel source coming in that's going to, be there to hopefully, make sure I don't just hit the wall at something epic. So, I'll preload before the race with a couple scoops. And then on the bike, I'll mix 2 scoops. I'll usually do 3 bottles. This is what I did in Boulder. I plan to do the same thing actually in Kona. I'll do 3 bottles with 2 scoops of plain and 2 scoops of like high glycemic. And like Matt alluded to, I'm like, if you looked at my tests in the lab, what I burn at race pace effort, it's insane. It's a lot of calories, and it's not something that slow drip is going to do all by itself. It's, when you're racing at that intensity, and over the years, Ironman at the professional level has definitely kind of switched gears from that high end aerobic to just an all out race, almost like a 70.3 used to be. So I'll definitely rely on high glycemic as well with that baseline, like I said, of the UCAN. So the 3 bottles, 2 UCAN, 2 scoops of high glycemic, a couple of caffeinated gels. I am a caffeine guy, and I use it as part of my racing as well, particularly for focus. I think it is a big help for brain function. And then when I get onto the run after pre-fueling, kind of like Matt said with Jonah, he's sleeping through the night off of UCAN. I get through the run off of the preloading I do before the race and on the bike. Hopefully 2:45, definitely, hopefully under 3 hours of running. I'm going to rely on that slow drip that's already running through my body to carry me through. Now, if you're out there for 15, 16 hours and you are racing at a more aerobic level, then it's going to be a different plan. By the time I hit the run, I'm water, Coke, and some gels. If you are in that 15-hour, longer category, then you have to start thinking, okay, how do I space out my UCAN to make sure that slow drip is running the entire race? And I know Matt, one of the things he does is a gel flask, kind of like almost like a gel mix of UCAN. So it's just a little more denser mix in a gel flask. And he has that on the run. So it's all about kind of knowing what you're looking to do and what you need to be successful in your game plan, and then in making your nutrition plan around that.
That's great. I mean, you're really touching on so many of the things that I was going to say, as far as like how it's different, really racing at the elite level versus racing at the level that most of us are at, most more mere mortals. Because the energy demands.
Times now, you're pretty fast.
Thanks, Tim. that means a lot coming from you. But there's two sort of points I want to make here. Like, one is that you're incorporating some high glycemic into your plan. You're also taking in more calories per hour than most of your recreational athletes, because the recreational athletes, most of your anywhere between your 10, 12 up to 17 hours. Those athletes are generally more at that 70-something% of your FTP on the bike for a 70.3. Maybe it's like 70, 75, or maybe in the 60s, or even lower, like in the 50s of your FTP during an Ironman. And so you're very much in a more aerobic state there. So your energy demands are not nearly as high as they are for you. And you don't necessarily need that kind of kick that you get from the high glycemic carbs that you find to be beneficial in your racing when you're at these higher intensities. And then the other thing, and one of the questions that somebody chimed in with, which I think is really good right now, is during your long training rides, is 1 serving of UCAN per hour or 1 serving every 90 minutes? Like, what's your typical dosage during a aerobic training ride like that? And then how does that differ from racing? Like, how many calories per hour are you taking during racing?
Yeah, so I usually start with two scoops in a bottle when I start a ride. So I have 3 cages on my bike. I'll have a bottle with just 2 scoops of orange or the lemon, two bottles of water. And I always try to use that just to get through the first stop. And I think one of my last rides before I left Boulder was over 4 hours before we stopped. And I had
2 servings for 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's one serving every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that very
preloading. I did the bar and a piece of toast or something before. But that's something I built up to too. I think I just as you get fitter and then as you start fueling properly, you get more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're definitely very efficient. I remember some of the early indications when you were just really started beginning to use UCAN. You said something like you went out for a ride. It was like 1 serving of lemon for 3 hours or something. I was like, whoa, all right, that's raising some eyebrows here. Like, you're definitely pretty efficient, pretty fat adapted. You were definitely in aerobic zone on that ride, and a little bit goes a long way with UCAN. So for any of the listeners who aren't as familiar with UCAN, the recommendation is something like 300 calories an hour of the high glycemic stuff, even during training. But with UCAN, really 1 serving per 90 minutes, give or take, is approximately right. And that's only about 80 calories an hour. And as you just described, sometimes it's more like 50 calories an hour. So for most people in training, 50 to 100 calories an hour of UCAN, it really simplifies things. You don't have to have a ton. A little bit goes a long way, keeps you really steady. And then during your racing, you're taking in far more than that because your energy expenditure is so high. I mean, you're racing at an Ironman distance, something in like probably full Ironman distance, something at like 80% of your FTP for, 4 something hours.
Yeah, I mean, and there's parts on the bike that it's even higher than that. I mean,
Right. You got these bursts where you're like attacking to make sure you stay with a group
even
or
I
something.
remember hot V, you could be 20, 30 minutes. One year I was over FTP for 30 minutes going up that climb. So
Wow.
you're raised.
So what is your calorie intake then during racing, like per hour while you're on the bike? Do you know?
It's varied. It's been anywhere from 80 to 110 grams of carbs.
Okay. Yeah. So calorie wise, that's something like, what is that? Like something like 300 calories, give or take an hour?
Yeah, even more. I think it could be 4. I think it's 4 for grams, so
Mm-hmm.
450. But what you consume doesn't necessarily mean it's what your body is, that's actually getting used, processed. So I think when you can mix up different fuel sources too, like incorporating UCAN, which absorbs completely differently. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Matt, with the different molecule size. It's going to absorb differently in your gut. I think that helps you get in those extra calories too. And you actually use them. I mean, and consuming and using are different.
Yeah, what you're mentioning is because that molecular weight, right, that I mentioned before, how the molecule is so massive with superstarch, it really has two benefits there. One is that it's so long, it takes a long time to break down. You get that steady energy. We've talked about that sort of at length at this point, this consistent, long-lasting drip of energy over, over a long period of time. And then the other piece is that because it's so long, it means that the osmolality is very, very low, which is a good thing. Osmolality is a term that means that it clears through the stomach into the gut quickly. So water is sort of the baseline that has an osmolality of 0, and that clears the stomach quickly. Superstarch, pure superstarch, is something like 0 to 1. It's like almost nothing. It's almost like water. It clears the stomach very, very quickly because that molecular weight is so high. Things like maltodextrin in a typical solution, it might be something like 260. And simple sugars like a Gatorade is something even more. It's like 320, give or take. So it doesn't clear the stomach very quickly. So if anybody's ever experienced any of that sloshing, any of the GI distress, like the stomach aches, the bloating, feel like you want to vomit, maybe you do vomit, maybe you're just nauseous just looking at a gel or looking at that next, 5th bottle of Gatorade Endurance or whatever it might be, that's because of this fact that it's not clearing the stomach. It's sitting in your stomach. It's bothering it because of all this, heavy sugar concentration, these small molecules. So the way that Tim is using it, he's using UCAN as a way to give him that long-lasting steady drip, make it easy on the stomach, so that way he doesn't experience the GI distress, which Kona will be a really true test because it'll be in the heat. So I'm really excited to see how that pans out because you've had some issues in the past, even last year, even though you finished 4th, you still had some issues at around mile 10.
Yeah. My coaches had one dark patch on the run, but it was 13 miles. This year.
All right, so we're getting like, I think 3 or 4 people have asked, what is the high glycemic carb that you use? I've asked that Tim typically don't give props to the other companies that are out there, but in full transparency, we're an authentic and real company. So Tim, like, what's the high glycemic you typically use that you mix in with your UCAN?
Yeah, I mean, people will connect the dots, but I use Roctane from GU.
Easy to get, right?
What's that?
Rennie's sponsored. Rennie's sponsored. Easy to get.
They're one of Rennie's partners, and they do some good stuff too. So I'm happy to support Rennie's supporter.
All right. So how does it differ from competitor fuels, S fuels? So S fuels actually doesn't have, my understanding is it doesn't have any carbohydrates in it. It's actually just, I know they target very much the fat adapted community. I haven't personally used S fuels. It's pretty new, and since then I've been on UCAN. I've been completely sold ever since it won me over in 2014. But UCAN is going to give you steady energy over a long period of time with a carbohydrate that's actually going to give you energy. S fuels, my understanding is it's just going to allow you to tap into your fat stores, which UCAN does as well. So I hope that answers your question. And then do you consume, Tim, do you consume caffeine first thing in the morning of a race, or do you wait until well onto the bike?
No, I stick with my normal consumption, a cup or 2 of coffee in the morning before a race. And I've had old coaches and the old school guys like Peter Reed, who would cut out caffeine like 2 weeks before Kona. And now their kind of studies are coming out to show that doesn't really have any scientific merit to it. So I'm quite happy to stick with my normal routine. And yeah.
Cool. And I want to go back actually for a second because I mentioned when you talked about your full Ironman race nutrition plan, talking about how you're using UCAN in combination with some high glycemic carbs. One point I want to make is that if you'd like to try that in your own training, it's kind of a split picture with all the people that I interact with. Some of them find that they perform best on pure UCAN. Some of them find that they perform best on UCAN mixed with some sort of high glycemic, and that's either along the way, or it's maybe for most people tends to be UCAN for, say, preload of the race on the bike, and then beginning of the run, and then switch over to some high glycemic late in the run. So maybe midway through the run, and that's when they switch over. And that tends to, there's actually some studies that shows that some of the high glycemic can trigger the reward centers in the brain, particularly when you're fatigued like that in the second half of the race, second half of the run. So that's very much my plan. I go with the UCAN, like you mentioned before, Tim. Preload, I have 2 servings 45 minutes before. I have UCAN about 1 serving an hour while I'm on the bike. And then when I get to the run, I have a gel flask with 1 serving, concentrated version of UCAN in like 3 ounces of water. It's very thick, like a gel. And then when I get halfway through the run, that's when I start mixing in more of the high glycemic. I start grabbing whatever, gels, flat Coke, Red Bull, whatever sounds good at the time. And that tends to be a good combination for me and works really well for me. So nutrition is very, very individual. So you got to kind of find out what works for you, what works for your intensity level, your your gut, how sensitive it is, and all those things. And the other point I wanted to make is that I think there's like a misconception that has been around maybe since the early times of our company that UCAN is only being used by fat adapted athletes. And Tim obviously just explained how he's using UCAN, and he's not particularly, I mean, you're fat adapted, but you're not like a keto athlete, right? Like in that type of sense, or a low carb, high fat type of athlete. So I want to clear up that misconception that UCAN is only used by fat adapted athletes. I think that came about because a lot of our early supporters, like Bob Seebehar, like Jeff Volek, who from the very early days has been a big supporter and of the company. Many of the athletes that use UCAN are fat adapted athletes. It's really gained quite a foothold there because so many of the philosophies overlap with the philosophies and the features of UCAN, as far as blood sugar stabilization, muting your insulin levels, allowing you to tap into your fat stores. So really, they've grown to love it. But that said, there's athletes like Tim, Dr. Krista Austin, who has worked with Tim on some of his nutrition and has worked with hundreds of Olympians. She's really an impressive sports nutritionist. She's a huge fan of UCAN, and she's very much a conventional approach, targeting that higher input for her elite athletes and mixing the high glycemic with the UCAN, using UCAN mainly as a tool to allow her athletes to take in more, because it's easy on the stomach, because of what we talked about before with the osmolality. So I kind of want to clear up that misconception. There's a number of people that have come to me, even in the last month or two, that have said, this is strange. Are you allowed to mix it? And yeah, you are allowed to mix it. You can do that. So don't worry about
that. Actually, that's a great point, Matt. I remember when I talked with Krista, I had actually worked with Krista back years ago as well. And I was almost afraid to talk to her about that because I didn't quite understand, the position, and she's like, no, absolutely. Yeah, mix. You need to do that. It's part of your strategy. And I like to think of it as a smarter carb. It's a smarter choice in carbs for me. It's not necessarily the guy that's just living off of avocados and tree nuts. It's still having that understanding the benefits of carbohydrates and fueling and choosing the best one for the right job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, folks at our company call it a carb that doesn't act like a carb. It almost kind of acts like a fat, like it gives you that stable blood sugar. It doesn't really act like a carb. Your typical carb is like shooting your blood sugar through the roof. All right, so now let's see. Let's say pulling it away briefly from nutrition. What is your overall strategy for Kona, and what are your goals? I mean, it's 10 days away, so what are your thoughts here?
I can't believe it's 10 days away. I don't know if we have any other racers, Kona racers on the call, but I'm wishing you all the best. Safe travels out there, and of course, good, smooth preparations from here out. But for me, like we talked about, it's been rocky. The the good part about kind of having that running injury is it gave me a lot of time to focus on my bike and my swim, which I think this year is going to be a really important part of the race. Guys like Ali Brownlee and Jan Frodeno, I don't think anybody wants to run head to head with Patrick. So there's going to be guys looking to have a fast swim bike this year. And I think we have the horses to do so. So, my plan is to, have a good swim. I'm definitely a front pack guy, but you have to be on your toes and be in the right position to make sure you don't get dropped in that swim, because it's pretty rough. It's pretty brutal. So fingers crossed, have a good strong swim, and then get in that group of guys and be ready to work, and hopefully put some time into the rest of the field.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to open it up to questions. There's already been a number of them. I'll come back to a couple of those, as well as touch on some of the questions that I got in advance of this. But for the moment here, I'm going to, so for all the listeners, if you'd like to try UCAN, the best way for you, if you're a new UCAN user, is to do the UCAN Try Starter Pack. I'm going to put the link in the chat in just a moment. It has a sampling of all of our formats and flavors. And so you can try really all of what we have to offer. I think it's only missing maybe a couple of the flavors, but it's got all the formats. And I'm going to put that in the chat right now. So that's the link for the Try Starter Pack. We're offering it here at 50% off. So its retail value is $30, but it'll just be 15 bucks. So click the link that I had sent in the chat, and that's to get the Try Starter Pack. So if you haven't tried all the formats and flavors, or if you're new to UCAN, that's your best way to do it for sure. If you are already a UCAN fan, or you become a UCAN fan over the next month or two, there's a special 20% off discount code that you can use for anything on our site until the end of the year. And that code is TOINTRY. So it happens to be the same as TO's Twitter and Instagram handle. So if you want to follow Tim, you can do that too. It's TOINTRY, TOINTRI. And I'm also going to type in let's see, it's TOINTRY. I just punched in a 20% off. So if you click that link, TOINTRY, Generation UCAN, that'll pre-populate, it'll automatically populate the 20% off on our website. So you can use that for anybody who's looking to stock up or whatever it might be. Now we'll take some questions from listeners. So one of the questions that I got a little bit earlier on in this was, do you think that your nutrition the week of Kona is also important? What is your nutrition the week leading up to race day?
Yeah, definitely. Everything you do leading up to the race can, if you do things wrong, they magnify throughout the week. Honestly, I do pretty much the same as I do in regular training. And my thought is, I don't really need to carbo load. I'm cutting down my training volume so much that if I'm kind of on the same regimen, I will be carbo loading, because I'm not going to be, expending the energy I normally expend throughout the week. And
the years carbo, you just be going in with like an extra few pounds on you, and there's no need to do that.
Yeah, right. You can, yeah, especially when I think every extra gram of carb, you hold like 4 grams of water. So if anybody, which isn't always a bad thing in Kona, because you're gonna use that water later on in the race, but usually when you weigh in for that race, you're pretty heavy. It's not what you would call your fighting weight. But yeah, I mean, the years that I've really like carbo loaded and gone crazy, it's been disastrous. So similar diet to my day to day, and I'll probably have red meat once early in the week, and then try to have like a Thai noodle night or something, and then 2 nights before it's just plain chicken and white rice. Very simple.
Nice and bland. What's that?
I cut out the roughage like 48 hours before, so I'll stop the salads and all that stuff that might give you GI distress, all that really the fiber heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point about the fiber. That's something I learned back in 2014 or so when I was working with my sports nutritionist, that if you can reduce the fiber in your diet the day or two leading in, maybe even up to 3 days leading in, that could potentially help you from cleaning out during the race when you don't want to be cleaning out. Stay out of those porta potties. And by the way, I'm not racing, so you're going to find me at the Poke Shack on Friday, the day before the race. So the UCAN bars, how do they handle the heat? Do they get gooey or stay solid? I can take care of that one. So The cinnamon and the coffee bars, they do not have a chocolate coating. They do great in the heat. Those are the ones that I bring a cinnamon bars out on the training rides with me. The chocolate and the chocolate peanut butter bars, they're delicious. They do have a chocolate coating though, so do not bring them out if it's going to be above about 65, 70 degrees. They do get soft at around 65, 70, 75 degrees. If it's above 75, they're just a melty mess and they're no fun to have out there. So have them as snacks during the day or bring them out when it's cooler. How does that jive with you, Tim? Sound right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I kind of like the cinnamon and the coffee when you're there in your back pocket. They just get like a little softy and mushy.
Yep.
Really easy to eat while you're out riding. So that's my jam. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Krista Austin says take the cinnamon one and throw it in the microwave for 30 seconds, and it really softens it up and makes it even better. She claims it tastes like a cinnamon roll. I'm not going to oversell it though. Cinnamon rolls are amazing. I don't know. So here we go. Another question we have from Laird Lidster for Ironman distance training. The experiment was super concentrated mixture in one bottle. So I don't know if you specifically mentioned that before. Like you're doing 2 servings of UCAN and 2 servings of your high glycemic. So that to me sounds pretty concentrated. Have you ever tried with something even more concentrated?
Sorry?
Have you ever tried with something even more concentrated than that, or?
That's as much as I've done. No, I know people that have done really concentrated bottles, but then I just want to make sure that there's no problem mixing it up. And
yeah, for me, I know during training, I often go with 2 servings in 1 bottle. So like 1 serving every 10 ounces, which is typically what the company recommends. When I race though, I don't want to carry as many bottles, and I need to carry more because it's a longer race. Since an Ironman, I'm out there for a longer distance than I am in most of my training. So, or all of my training. So I bring a bottle with 3 to 4 servings in it. And I've heard people go as high as 7 servings of UCAN in 1 bottle, which to me sounds insane. That sounds like, basically a whole bottle of gel, UCAN gel. But just to give you some perspective though, like some people like it to be smoother and thinner and more dilute, and they might have 1 serving for 20 ounces, a whole bike bottle. They might have 2, they might have 3, 4, all the way up to as many as 7. But most people tend to fall in that 2 to 4 serving range for those. Let's see. From Jeff Krebs, we have some, here's the caffeine. Yeah, I think those were all touched on. And then, oh, yes, here's quite a good question. I don't know if I even know this answer in any of my conversations with you. For electrolytes in Kona, I mean, you're sweating like crazy. It's really, really, really darn hot. How do you actually get your electrolytes? Because UCAN only has a relatively low level. Your high glycemic still only has a relatively low level in it. So do you like add electrolytes into those bottles, or do you take salt capsules or like base salt or something? Like what do you do with that? How do you get electrolytes?
Yeah, I've done different stuff in the past. I've used salt sticks, capsules, and then I found I think my body responds better when I actually get the electrolyte in my mouth versus like just taking the capsules. I don't think my body it doesn't trigger that response that it's getting what it needs, in my opinion, as quickly as you do when you have it in your mouth. So I've just been like a salt or even just pink Himalayan salt, I mean, that's all you need. I just add that in there.
There's been studies that have shown that, and the whole sort of base philosophy there with their salt is that if you put it on your tongue, it actually it triggers the reward centers in your brain, but different pathways than it did with the high glycemic. But there's still that similar thing where all you need is to have it in your mouth, hit your tongue, and then it sends those signals to the brain like, I'm going to get this now. And so the brain says, okay, perceived effort goes down, motivation goes up, performance goes up. And that applies for both, the high glycemic idea where you can even just swill some Gatorade, spit it out, and it'll actually do the same thing as if you were to ingest a relatively small amount of high glycemic. So I find that to be kind of fascinating that you don't even have to actually ingest either the salt or the high glycemic, and yet you're going to get benefits from it because of the fact that it's triggering the brain. Let's see. And we got one question here from Matt Dunn. What was one of your best workouts leading into Kona?
Oh man, we did the other day. It was like a 2.5 or 3K swim with 1650 with short course yards, 1650 time trial, and then it was 180K bike with 90 minutes at, or 2.5 hour block that was 90 minutes at actually above Ironman effort, and then straight into 60 minutes at 70.3 effort.
Ooh,
And off of that, it was a 10K run at race pace.
wow. That's a big one. That's a simulation day for you.
It was simulation day. Yeah, definitely. Like that's when there's no stopping at gas stations and smoking and joking out front of a gas station. It was Julie's in a car handing off bottles. Got every race. I got my UCAN race mix ready to go. My squirt water bottles, just like in Kona. The plastic ones that they're going to give you. It was definitely a race simulation day.
It's like the thesis of the Dibbins degree.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got. Oh, he said he posted a code for the UCAN sample pack on the feed, but I don't see the feed. Where can I get the code? So look in the chat window. You should see that on your dashboard there. There's a chat section. You might have to hit the little down arrow. If you still can't see that, then hit me again with another message, and I'll figure it out. Let's see. Sorry, still a little confused on the mixing of the high glycemic and UCAN. Do you actually mix them in the same bottle, or are they in separate bottles? Same bottle, right?
Same bottle. Yeah, I actually use a shaker before I go out, and I'll mix them in a shaker, and then I'll pour it into my bottle.
Yeah, so what Tim's mentioning is like the shaker bottle. So you'll find them on our website. It has a wire ball in it. I mean, you may have some of them at home too, but the wire ball really helps because then it mixes up the UCAN very well. For anybody who hasn't tried it can be chalky, it can be thick, and it could be clumpy if you don't mix it properly. So get one of those shaker bottles with the wire ball in it. It really helps to mix it up really smoothly. So that's why Tim mixes it up in that first and then puts it into the bottles after that. So how many watts at the 90-minute effort was the question. I think it was relating to that simulation.
I think I was 293 for the 90 minutes, and then like 310 or 315, I think, for the 60 minutes after that.
And is that average power or normalized power?
It's normalized.
Gotcha. Yeah, but I'm sure the VI is probably really, really low on that. Something like 1.02 or something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty consistent. Yeah.
Wild stuff. See, I can nerd it out like these guys can too. How competitive does it get with you and Rennie training? Spouse challenge? See who's better for fun and workouts?
We tend to, since we have different coaches, we tend to like do our own thing in training. I just give her a hard time on easy rides because she always seems to be a half a wheel in front of me, and she'll kill me when someone tells her I said that. But
and then I also I saw at Santa Rosa 70.3 that it was during the pro panel. You guys were both up there, and Rennie said something like she's going to run faster than you in Kona.
Oh yeah,
so she talked some smack.
He did. Yeah, she. I like to look at it as a whole race and not just one of the three. It's a lose-lose.
Yeah, right. It is. You got to be careful. You're married to her.
If she runs under 250, then
right, bow down, right?
that'll be amazing.
That's insane. Race morning breakfast in Kona. What's your go-to?
I'll do the UCAN bar, and I'll probably or add on another piece of toast with jam and almond butter, and then I'll do 2 scoops of drink. Just kind of sip that. That'll be after breakfast, kind of in between.
Gotcha. Yep. That was exactly my question. Like, kind of what the timing of that was, and it's after breakfast, but sometime in between then and the start. Yeah, so what about solid nutrition on the bike? I like a bar at Special Needs. Do you use any solid nutrition, or is it all fluid?
Usually fluid, yeah.
Yeah. I know some people really like, especially people who are going to be out there for longer than the, barely over 8 hours that Tim's out there. If you're out there for like somewhere between 10, 12, and 17 hours, that's a long time to be out there. That's literally like almost twice as much as Tim's out there. So some people really like to have something to chew, have something solid that'll sit in your stomach. I mean, you've heard of those people who have like Subway sandwiches in T2, but maybe not go as far as a Subway sandwich for most people, but having something to chew like a UCAN bar, cinnamon or the coffee bars, I would say, unless it's cool out, then those could be nice to have. Another thing that helps curb hunger is having like the protein enhanced.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I
Yeah,
was saying
there's
another thing that helps curb hunger is like the is the protein enhanced versions. They help to curb the hunger because the protein mix adds to some satiety. And what were you going to
yeah.
say, Tim? Sorry, I cut you
Oh
off.
yeah, no, just it's just nice sometimes to have know that you got something else like a treat. You
Hmm.
know, if you gotta have like a bar or something, you can get excited. That might get
And
you to
nobody
the.
asked this. No, nobody asked this question, but I got a question. Do you have anything in your special needs? Do you use that?
I don't plan on using it. It's usually got like a backup mix bottle in case I
Hmm.
lose one of my bottles going out of town, and then some backup gels. But
Yeah.
I haven't gotten special needs in Kona in several years.
Gotcha. I always marvel at those guys that go through and they're riding at, still 20 something miles an hour. They're grabbing the bag. They're like sitting up, both hands are in the bag. They're ripping stuff out. They're just like, changing bottles and then they're throwing the bag aside and sitting up without holding onto the handlebars, going at that speed. But it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I do the same thing actually. I just stash some bottles in there. So that way, if you drop one or eject
Right.
one, then you've got a backup. You're not just screwed and you're missing your UCAN. Um, let's see, if you mix a bottle earlier in the day, can you refrigerate and use later on? I'll take that one. So yes, you can. Actually, it's even better that way. What we typically recommend to improve the consistency and the overall experience of drinking the Superstarch products, mix it the night before and then take it out in your training ride or training run, whatever it might be the next day. It tends to be that much smoother when it's refrigerated and when it's had a while, say 12 plus hours or 20, even just at least 3 or 4 hours to sit. It tends to dissolve and just become that much smoother. So
You're
I'll
just telling
even,
me this now, Matt?
you know that, don't you? Come on.
You start writing stuff down here now.
Take some notes, Tim. So sometimes I'll even like for demos, like if I have two demos in a row, I'll mix it up. All the stuff that I need for the first demo, mixing it up at like some track workout or something, serving it up to the people, and then if I have one the next day, I'll use the same stuff, the leftover stuff, and that tends to be even better than it was the day before. It's just that much smoother. It doesn't go beyond about like 3 or 4 days. If you let it, if once it's mixed, don't drink it past 3 or 4 days or so. It is a food and it's natural, so it will go bad. The powder itself, before it's mixed, stays for a long, long time because it is very much dehydrated. So it's super starch. It's cornstarch. It's really very, very dry and it won't go bad for a long time. The expiration date you'll notice on all the tubs is way out, like usually at least a year out, sometimes more. Oh, that's a good question. What competitor do you most admire?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, there's several guys. I think Jan's professionalism is pretty top notch. Lionel's craziness,
You gotta admire that, right?
being able to hurt himself, and then I think and Sebi's dedication, like the way he's improved his running over the years, it's amazing. So you just see guys that are focused and doing the work, and you have to respect that.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember 70.3, I think it was, when he was doing that sprint finish with Tim Reed, was it? Back a handful of years ago, maybe 2016 or something like that. That was when I first noticed that Sebi had really improved that run. It was amazing how
Yeah.
fast he ran that day. We always just kind of viewed him as like an Uber biker, but all of a sudden he popped it off. Making a gel/paste with the starch. Is this something you have tried? How dense should I make it? Add any electrolytes? Salt okay? Yes, definitely. That's something that many people have done as a workaround to the fact that we don't have a gel yet, but stay tuned. 2020, it's on its way. But in the meantime, take a gel flask or a Ziploc bag. It could be a hard gel flask, a soft gel flask. People have used all the different kinds of things like that. But you take about 1 serving of UCAN in about 3 ounces of water. Most people try to mix it in a bowl first, and then you kind of spoon it into, or pour it if it's thin enough, into your gel flask afterwards. Because if you try to mix it in the gel flask itself, it's very, very small, and there's not a lot of room in there for your serving of UCAN in the 3 ounces of water. So when you try to shake it, it's not really going to shake that well. So try to like stir it nicely into a bowl and then ladle it into your gel flasks. I use that for long runs. I use that for open marathons. I use it for long bricks when I get onto the run portion, and I use it during my Ironman marathons. And that tends to be pretty similar, pretty typical for what a lot of people do.
Yeah, or mix it in your water bottle and then just put your cap back on and squirt the water bottle into the mix into the gel flask.
There you go. Take it from the best. Add any electrolytes? Yes, you can add electrolytes. I like to take the salt capsules, like the salt stick salt capsules, or you can try it with like something like a base salt too, or the Himalayan pink salt, that might work. But adding, in the past, I've done the salt capsules themselves. So I take 2 salt capsules, open it up into my UCAN drinks, so 1 bike bottle, and I won't go any more than 2 because if you do, it gets too salty. And if it's too salty, you don't actually want to drink it. And then you're not getting your fuel in either. So it's nice when it's all in one. You can just drink the bottle and you know that you're getting your electrolytes too. Because like I mentioned before, UCAN has some electrolytes in it, but it's a relatively low level. It'll be good for mild days, but on hotter days, especially if you're a heavy sweater, you need to enhance the electrolyte content that's in there in order to properly hydrate and perform at your best. So the way to do that, or one of the ways to do that, is to take those salt capsules and open it up into your drinks, your UCAN bottles. The other way, keep taking the salt capsules. The other way, use UCAN Hydrate. Mix UCAN Hydrate, a stick of that, with a tub of the plain, or sorry, a scoop of the plain, and you'll get a great combination there. That's a fan favorite. So you get the lack of flavor from the plain super starch, but you get the flavor from the UCAN Hydrate, so you don't get any flavor clashing if you try to mix, like the flavored versions of the super starch. So you don't get any flavor clashing. So you get the plain UCAN, you get the stick of the hydrate, and so that way you get your electrolytes, your fuel, and your electrolytes, your flavor all in one. A follow-up to the which competitor do you admire most? Who do you got to say somebody specific on the female side, don't you?
Oh yeah. Oh, they're not my competitors though.
That's all right. Fair enough.
But of course, Rinny.
Got to say Rinny though, of course.
Rinny takes the cake.
All right, I think we covered all the questions. So if anybody has any more questions, chime in quickly. We are a bit over schedule. We wanted to keep it at about an hour, but this has been awesome, and we've had so many great questions. I mean, really, this questions thing over here, this little window is just full of questions. So thank you very much for the activity. It looks like you got a lot out of it, and feel free. I've got another one. Are you aware Izzy will be superhuman sharing DNA with you and Rennie?
Hopefully she gets her mom's coordination and maybe my swimming. We have had some partners ask us if they could sign her, get first right of refusal for future contracts with her.
Would you expect a smart nutrition plan to extend your current professional career?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, when you're not fueling properly during training, it's a lot harder on the body. So I think smart nutrition, smart training, and strength work, gym work. I think those are kind of the 3 things that are really going to help me keep racing into my 40s and racing well. I mean, honestly, I've had some of my best training sessions ever this year, and I feel great, and I'm bouncing back way better than I have in the past. So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing the right stuff, I mean, Tom Brady's my hero. That guy does a lot of things right. He does a lot of stuff right, and he's still slinging the ball and winning Super Bowls. So.
Yeah, including he's also a fan of the same nutrition.
I've heard rumors.
So, unfortunately, yeah. So we're going to be wrapping it up here. I know we're all Ironman athletes. I think somebody just said I've got a workout that starts at 5 a.m. Thanks for sticking it out, Eric, so that we could hear for the whole thing. I know we're all triathletes. We're a little crazy. 10 p.m. now for the East Coasters. That's beyond most of our bedtimes. I know it is for me. I'm usually in bed at 9:30. So yeah, we'll wrap it up here, but you got those links still in the chat. We will be sending them by email as well. You'll get the recording. I think it's going to be sent out at about an hour after this webinar. You'll get an email with the recording, and then with the links to the UCAN Try Starter Pack to the 20% off. And I think that's it for then. And then you'll also get an email at some point tomorrow. So yeah, thanks again, Tim, for coming on. I mean, this was fantastic, and thank you so much, especially so close to Kona, just 10 days out, taking up some of your time so that you could
share
with the community here on.
Oh, no, it's all good. Izzy and Rennie are already in Kona, so I'm bachelor for the week right now. So you see, I'm a lot more active on Instagram this week.
And check out the follow Tim on Instagram, follow him on Twitter, on Facebook, and then Tim and Rennie show. So subscribe to that. It's fantastic if you haven't watched it yet. All right, that's it. Everybody's just kind of saying some well wishes through the questions now. So thanks again, Tim.
Yeah.